The First Indochina War, raging from 1946 to 1954, marked a pivotal chapter in Vietnamese history. It pitted the French, desperately clinging to their colonial empire, against the Viet Minh, a determined Vietnamese independence movement led by Ho Chi Minh. The seeds of the conflict were sown during the tumultuous years of World War II, as Japan occupied French Indochina, only to be replaced by the returning French at war's end. The Vietnamese people, having tasted freedom, were in no mood to return to the yoke of colonialism. Their aspirations for self-determination clashed head-on with France's desire to retain its Indochinese possessions. France, still reeling from World War II, found itself embroiled in a costly and increasingly unwinnable conflict in Vietnam. The nation, still recovering from the devastation of the war, was ill-prepared for another prolonged military engagement. Yet the French government was determined to reassert its colonial dominance in Indochina, a region rich in resources and strategic importance. The French strategy, heavily reliant on conventional warfare, proved ill-suited to the Vietnamese terrain and the guerrilla tactics employed by the Viet Minh. The dense jungles and rugged mountains of Vietnam provided the perfect cover for the guerrilla fighters, who used hit-and-run tactics to great effect. The French forces, trained for traditional battles, found themselves outmaneuvered and outsmarted at every turn. The French, often bogged down in static positions, struggled to control the vast countryside. Their inability to adapt to the fluid and unpredictable nature of guerrilla warfare left them vulnerable and demoralized. The sprawling rural areas of Vietnam became a battleground where the French could never gain a decisive advantage. A series of military blunders further weakened their position. Poor planning, inadequate supply lines, and underestimation of the Viet Minh's capabilities led to numerous setbacks. Each mistake compounded the difficulties faced by the French forces, eroding their morale and effectiveness. The appointment of General Henri Navarre in 1953, tasked with breaking the Viet Minh's back, would prove to be a fateful decision. Navarre, confident in his abilities, devised a bold plan to turn the tide of the war. However, his lack of understanding of the local conditions and the enemy's resilience would soon become apparent. Navarre's ambitious plan to lure the Viet Minh into a decisive battle at Dien Bien Phu, a remote valley near the Laos border, would backfire spectacularly. The French forces, entrenched in the valley, found themselves surrounded and outgunned. The battle, intended to be a turning point, instead became a symbol of French failure and a prelude to their eventual withdrawal from Vietnam. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, commencing in March 1954, became a microcosm of the entire war, encapsulating the intense struggle between two vastly different ideologies and military strategies. This battle was not just a fight for territory, but a symbolic confrontation that would determine the future of Vietnam and the fate of French colonial ambitions in Southeast Asia. Symbolizing the clash between French colonialism and Vietnamese nationalism, it was a defining moment that showcased the resilience and determination of the Vietnamese people against a well-equipped colonial power. The French, under Navarre's command, believed that establishing a fortified base at Dien Bien Phu would cut off Viet Minh's supply lines into Laos and force them into a conventional battle. They were confident that their superior firepower and strategic positioning would lead to a decisive victory. However, they grossly underestimated the Viet Minh's determination, logistical capabilities, and ability to adapt. The Viet Minh, with their deep understanding of the terrain and innovative tactics, were prepared to challenge the French forces in ways they had not anticipated. The Viet Minh, under the brilliant leadership of General Vo Nguyen Giap, had other plans. Giap, a master strategist, orchestrated a campaign that would exploit the weaknesses of the French fortifications and turn the tide of the battle in favor of the Vietnamese. They meticulously encircled the French positions, their artillery hidden in the surrounding hills, ready to rain down a storm of fire upon the unsuspecting French. This strategic encirclement and relentless artillery bombardment would eventually lead to the fall of Dien Bien Phu, marking a significant turning point in the First Indochina War. Section 4. Vietnamese Ingenuity versus French Firepower. The siege of Dien Bien Phu was a brutal affair, marked by relentless shelling, desperate hand-to-hand combat, and heavy casualties on both sides. The Viet Minh, despite their inferior firepower, displayed remarkable ingenuity and resilience. They used bicycles to transport supplies through the dense jungle, painstakingly hauling artillery pieces over mountains to gain a strategic advantage. The French, their air superiority neutralized by the Viet Minh's anti-aircraft guns, found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. Their fortified positions, once deemed impregnable, were slowly but surely pounded into submission by the Viet Minh's relentless artillery barrages. Section 5. Dien Bien Phu's bitter aftermath. A defeat with far-reaching consequences. After 57 grueling days, on May 7, 1954, the French garrison at Dien Bien Phu surrendered. The defeat sent shockwaves through France and around the world. It marked the end of French colonial rule in Indochina and had profound implications for the future of Southeast Asia. The defeat shattered France's prestige and undermined its global standing, accelerating the decline of its once mighty empire. The loss of Indochina forced France to confront its colonial past and re-evaluate its role on the world stage. Section 6. The rise of Vietnamese nationalism, a phoenix from the ashes. The victory at Dien Bien Phu was a watershed moment for Vietnamese nationalism. It galvanized the Vietnamese people and demonstrated that even a small nation could defeat a powerful colonial power. It solidified Ho Chi Minh's leadership and paved the way for the establishment of an independent North Vietnam. The war, however, came at a heavy price. Years of conflict had ravaged the country, leaving it deeply divided and on the brink of further turmoil. Section 7. The Seeds of a New Conflict, the Legacy of Dien Bien Phu. The Geneva Accords of 1954 officially ended the First Indochina War, but they also sowed the seeds of a new conflict. The agreements were meant to bring peace and stability to the region, but they instead laid the groundwork for further strife. The Accords were a temporary solution, a band-aid on a festering wound that would soon reopen. The Accords temporarily divided Vietnam along the 17th parallel, with Ho Chi Minh's communist forces in control of the north and a US-backed government in the south. This division was supposed to be temporary, with national elections planned to reunify the country. However, these elections never took place, leading to increased tensions and hostilities between the north and south. The stage was set for the Vietnam War, a conflict that would draw in the United States and escalate into one of the most controversial and costly wars in American history. American involvement began with military advisors and support, but it quickly grew into a full-scale war. The conflict would last for nearly 2 decades, leaving deep scars on both the Vietnamese and American societies. The First Indochina War, culminating in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of colonialism and the enduring power of national self-determination. The battle was a decisive victory for the Vietnamese nationalists and a humiliating defeat for the French, signaling the end of French colonial rule in Indochina. It also serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of underestimating one's opponent and the unintended consequences of military intervention. The French miscalculated the resolve and capabilities of the Vietnamese forces, leading to their eventual defeat. This miscalculation is a lesson that echoes through history, reminding us of the complexities and unpredictable nature of war.